It's election day, November 2nd, 9:30 in the PM. We got Mechanized and Trip. What's up, bro?
What's up? Went out and voted?
I did not, actually.
Me neither. And I feel bad for it just because the local elections, I feel, is like what matters most.
That's true. That is true.
But whatever.
But I mean, I could have fucking, like, voted for that Silva guy because I don't like that Eric Adams dude because he's like De Blasio 2.0. This is an interruption from the future coming in to say that Eric Adams did turn out to be a bum, did turn out to be a leftist puppet, De Blasio 2.0. What did I tell you?
That's the way I see it.
What
but
I heard.
I like the other guy too, but what killed it for me was the stupid red beret, bro.
Bro,
that alone, just a fucking look.
That's funny you said that.
You're fucking. He's some kind of stooge or a clown to me. Regardless of what he's done, And,
bro, I said that exact thing to somebody else because they were on. Like I didn't even watch it, but I just saw a picture of them at the debate.
Did they get butthurt about it?
And he's wearing the fucking beret, and I'm like, bro, I get it. You're a guardian angel.
I'm like, calm down. Like,
you want to be a mayor now. Like, so which one is it? Like, you can't be both.
You can't be both, bro, at all. Because
you did that before. Now it's something else. You gotta take it off. I don't know.
And that's besides the fact that I feel like that's technically in theory before our time because he was what was it 70s that he was doing all that shit.
Yeah.
So I had heard of him as a child, but
oh yeah.
Technically, I knew what he was about and all that other shit or whatever.
I think I remember his name kind of growing up. You're right, but like I forgot about him, and then now obviously he came back. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Do we know the results? Not yet. I guess I could look it up. But... Eric Adams in a landslide. It's not important. That's not what this is about. This is about. Let's go back because we were having a good conversation before we even turned the mic on. Hold on, let me adjust my seat over here. Anything's good. And, anything works for the show. And that's our cue to remind you guys to subscribe.
Yeah. And we'll be and don't worry, we'll find all kinds of clever ways to remind you time and time again, if need be.
So I gave you a little compliment before, you appreciate it. I said you got the gift of gab. And the way I look at it, we were talking about it a little bit. The way I look at it is, you said there's haters out there. I strive to be comedic, So I like to give props to people that are funny because that's the same way I look at YouTube videos on like, comedians doing stand up. I see I'm not trying to steal their jokes, but I'm trying to see their mannerisms, how they interact with the crowd. All that shit you can learn from. So,
I think it's always reference points though, because remember we forget that nothing's original. So that's why I don't feel bad. So to that was part of the point because I did say that I highlighted the fact that he wasn't a hater and that he was an actual appreciator because I feel like we need more appreciators out here.
True.
And I appreciate all those that subscribe. So that's a second mention of it.
I like
but
that.
The whole point was to the appreciation point. I'm not timid because I feel like, I kind of, the way I see it, a lot of independent study or research as far as with comedians, the full end of the spectrum too, because regardless of whether it was Andrew Dice Clay, Mooney, Rickles, Pryor, and all the new guys,
Murphy,
Murphy, Chappelle, I feel that in so many ways they overlap also too, because to your point about not only what it is that they, to a degree, they kind of mirror each other's delivery. So it's not so much that they recycle the jokes because again, there's nothing original, but it's that same tone. And I feel like that tone, given that like what we have, that 1-2 is important to constantly always like. It's like almost like a fire. Yeah, you feed a fire. You feed it you fan flames.
You gotta play to the crowd, and you feed off of them, and you adjust. Absolutely.
And it's something that I take pride in just because even from me growing up, I was kind of, I guess what you would call kind of like a timid kid, a shy kid, kind of introverted, but not in the way that I guess that it's the way they popularize it in Hollywood and in film and all of that, where they super make it over the top. Like I wasn't a fucking social awkward or not, you know what I mean? The way based off what society supposedly, deems that, but there was aspects that I now realize that technically, depending on the audience, would be considered awkward. But then that's when I accepted the awkward, and like I mentioned when I was there, playing around with our counterparts.
Hey,
I was basically there telling them that I was proud of my stupid. It's not that I believe that I'm stupid, but I know that that's one of those trigger words that since it's a mean word, it'll stir an emotion, and then you just run with that. I feel like that's the most important part of it.
I remember, as a kid, I called my cousin stupid once, and he took that shit to heart, man. Like, he really felt like he was stupid, because I called him stupid, and that made me feel bad. Like, he never got over that, like that I called him stupid.
And it's funny because it's one of the few things that till this day, usually I'll sit there and say, I got tough skin, I got skin like leather, born to suffer. But you call me stupid, I get real stupid. You know what I mean? That's the way I see it. There's no other. Then I'm like, okay, well, now is the time to be proud and stand in my shit and be proud of my stupid.
That's interesting.
I want to excel in stupidity.
You can hurt somebody even more than saying like "fuck you." You call someone stupid.
Yeah.
Or slow.
Yeah, because you're insulting their intelligence. Like, I realize that now. Like, there's other terms for it too. Because even imbecile, moron, idiot, all these are
dumb,
like,
bro.
Dumb. These are horrible words if you really think about it. Because
they're not even that bad, but they're worse than some of the bad words, right?
Yeah, but technically based off the book definition of it, because then wasn't it something that those were all categories for those that don't know for intelligence quotient. Like if you were low IQ, those were all different.
Dumb is definitely one. I know that.
I think I forget which one is the lowest, but I think like idiot is probably like the worst you can call someone.
Yes, idiot's bad one.
And believe it or not, idiot was always one that would just I felt like an idiot. You know what I mean?
I think they touched that on Forrest Gump. Like he was a idiot or something.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because you see our minds like on the same wavelength. Because when you mentioned about stupid, I was like, well, stupid is as stupid does.
For sure.
So then that's why I that's one of my favorite all-time films.
Run, Forrest, run! Run, Forrest!
Oh, I'm like, oh, for sure. I'm like, what? I'm called stupid? Oh, you're gonna see stupid right now.
I read that book. It's one of the. I haven't read many books in my life. I'm, sad to say. You know how much smarter I would be if I did read. Imagine. I wouldn't be here.
Bro, listen.
The place that we won't name, I wouldn't be here if I did.
And that'll be for another time. Hopefully the next time. But I just want people to harp on that word, imagine. And imagination. Only because me and my cousin, for the longest, we would come up with the most craziest any kind of schemes that you could think of possibly. Yeah. Or anything that could even just to use our creativity. And then sometimes sit there and wonder and be like, yo, imagine. And it was something so stupid, but funny that we go back to the stupid. Yeah. But it was silly or lighthearted in that sense. But it was good that just using our imagination. Sometimes be like, yo, imagine. And then my mind would just run.
That's a profound word, imagine, for sure. Yeah.
Because I even say it as I the way I even say it, the tone it comes with like 4 or 5 dots that I basically see it as. Like I can register the dots. It's at least 4.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what else were we getting into? We had a couple of good laughs with some people in the hallway just a little while ago. Like, we can't always keep the mic on. Mic can't be on all the time.
But to the point about the gift of the gab, I feel like, and this is probably goes counter to what most people would assume, but I feel to have that art, because to a degree that's one of those things that, how sometimes certain things you're just born with. Again, I can vouch for the fact that I guess I had it because as a child I wasn't bold enough to speak my mind. But I would I curse at adults or anybody else who I felt that regardless of my height, regardless of my age, anybody that I felt that I had any kind of superiority on the intelligence end of things. Mm-hmm. But I would listen. So you would think that somebody that's good with words or that's good at, basically deploying them, because what is it, Wu-Tang that said that the words were weapons or swords and all this other stuff. Sure. To weaponize words and to weaponize thoughts. I feel that it's important. Yeah, it's important to listen, and I feel people don't listen enough.
Good segue, because I remember I wanted to say, you said that you felt like you were shy or timid growing up. I feel like I was the same way, but not in the sense where I was like scared.
No, I wasn't.
I wasn't scared. It was like, I feel like
more out of manners and respect to not curse someone out.
And I was listening because I was like kind of like analyzing you, him, her, everyone, right? While you're speaking, I'm watching, I'm learning, I'm picking up things.
But now I remember, though, as a child, that technically was passing judgment. Because I remember, because it's something that I teach my daughter even now.
Yeah.
Just because they're bigger than you doesn't make them smarter than you. And I remember being a child and being, you know, I don't know, and nowhere near past 6, 7, maybe even 8. And by then, even feeling sometimes, looking at the, like, whatever adult it was. In some cases, even a close relative. Or in some cases, even a parent. And I would just look at them like, do better, bro. And without even having those exact words in mind, I just knew that they were dropping the ball somehow. I couldn't exactly put my finger on what it was, but I knew something was off. And I feel like that's a skill, and a survival skill.
Classic mechanized catchphrase: "Do better." And if you subscribe, you would have heard the other podcast where we talked about doing better.
Yeah. And as you do better, you feel better, and then it continues the cycle of doing better.
Yes. So, just to recap, we grew up being listeners. Now we talk. Sometimes we don't shut up. Sometimes.
I don't shut the fuck up. Like,
yeah,
I'm polite to him because the love and respect I have for him is sometimes I'll shut up as he speaks, but even then sometimes.
Well, that's because we have to have good airtime and whatnot, or you can't be like bumbling, talking and talking. Nobody would subscribe.
Yeah.
But
that's a third mention, folks. The power of 3.
So it's important to understand that that's why we're the way we are now, because I was quieter growing up, Now I won't shut up.
But it's cool because the last time we in part spoke about, at least a couple episodes back, about the dreaming, and I know that you've mentioned about it being your bucket list to actually get on stage and perform.
I'm doing it.
I feel like
I've actually performed on a stage before. I DJ'd. It was a DJ competition. I was in college. And so I've had that experience where I've been in front of a crowd, and I was fine, and like I feel like I would be fine. I will be fine when I do it again. I don't got a problem with that. I'm more worried about like disappointing myself, to be honest. Like if the crowd don't laugh.
Well, but that's the thing, and I meant to.
Whatever,
It's funny because you mentioned too that because I don't even the word funny sometimes I struggle with. Not only I guess that's in part me being modest, but just because words also mean things. I guess I guess I am humorous. I feel like it could be towards a target audience. I do try to have the mass appeal, but to that point too, I kind of don't have an interest in making others laugh. Is the rule of thumb that I have. So if anybody ever thought, oh, why are you so funny? It's because I'm not interested in making anyone else laugh. I'm kind of trying to amuse myself.
Yeah.
So before I even expel the words out my mouth, most times it has first have, like we've covered that too. Like it's almost like a rehearsed dialogue, but with self.
Yeah, with self. I like that.
With self.
Yeah.
There's not a thought that's wasted. Everything methodical in that sense.
And that happens, that's the story of my life. Like, I'll say fucked up stuff to people, or jokes, or whatnot, and the people, oh, that's fucked up. And it is, a lot of the times, but
it's shock value.
I didn't say it, like, I said it for me, I said it because I thought that would have been, like, a good line right there.
In part, people forget that, at least, like I said, and I'm even scared to even put out this thought, but the comedy aspect of things, I feel like people forget that a lot of it, or at least one of the benchmarks of it, is for the shock factor. You have to say something outlandish, more outrageous, regardless of what the fuck you look like. And to your point, like I've been on stage before too. I just did it to help somebody else that had their stage fright. Because I'm not easily impressed even with myself. So at the end of the day, could care less what anybody else thinks. But again, I did reference Rickles. So it was one of those things where I didn't bomb, but I didn't, like I said, I feel like there's a tone for it, and given that I wasn't, because there's also people don't realize too that these comedians too is like, everything is formalized too. Like there's a formula to it. They have a process. They have their notes, all this shit. So I'm just there shooting off, pretty much off the lip.
And to be honest, like I've watched like various sets from the same comedian, and they reuse their own material because they're rehearsing all the time. Like they're rehearsing for themselves to make that one joke perfect.
The geniuses though are always the ones that still hit the same tone, because people have even told me, and a lot of it, because I think we're both really good storytellers, but people always, that's why they remember a lot of the stories, because even with Leps, how many times has he, there's times I'll break into an anecdote, you know, to share with folks. He's like, oh, I remember this one. He remembers because that's the other thing too. We benchmark our conversations, folks, with key words. So I use vocabulary to basically is to trigger thought. They're like verbal cues.
Yep. You like my when I drop them shits.
Yeah.
A couple of things.
And it's just and then that's why, to that point, like I said, sometimes it's the most basic thing that it'll make me get fucking giddy. Like I'm talking about, like where I get fucking he. And nobody else understands because they're like, but this guy's kind of, you know, just kind of funny on his own. Like, I wouldn't think that and it could be the most basic thing, but it's just the delivery, is the timing. And I feel that, like I said, that to a degree does, I probably get the gift of gab definitely from my dad, from a Lobo. So, you know what I mean?
Nice.
Shouts out to Lobo. He's not feeling too well physically today, but, you know, he'll be out the hospital tomorrow.
Oh,
He's good, yeah.
All right.
But a lot of it too is just the overcoming of the mind, because there was times that I got older, that now, you know, I always had the respect because he's my dad, but we worked together, you know, so it's almost like, it's not that you stop respecting your dad, but you don't also now like you're a grown ass man, it's man to man. And it was funny because there'd be times that we would kind of butt heads, but I realized that we're just so much alike. But he also allowed me to be outlandish and what others would deem as eccentric, because there'd be times they'd be like, yo, why don't you just kick his ass? And my dad would be like, well, it's easy for me to get somebody else to whoop his ass, but I won't even trouble them with that. So technically I was my dad's own light work. So I was like, you know what, fuck. Then I was like, but like I said, a verbal cue, such basic words could stir different emotions out of others. So
you would say that you got the gift of gab from, you said, El Lobo.
He's a beast, bro. This guy could charm the socks off of a.
Is it a howling? Is it a howl effect? Like, what do you think? I mean,
the one way that I knew that, like I said, but it was in both cases that he really just did have it, because again, people the unappreciators, because they're fucking even haters. This is an overused term. The unappreciators, those that don't, would always be like, oh well, he's only like that because, you know, he's a real fucking, you know, he's like the guy from The Mask. That's how I always see him. Like, that's how his whole swag was like, you know, like fucking Jim Carrey when he put on The Mask.
Ooh, somebody stop me!
So he was real fucking, you know, Cuban Pete about his shit. Then he would turn into the most charismatic piece of shit ever around a lady. So then the unappreciators would be like, oh, he only turns that on for the fucking chicks. When I started to see him fucking deploy it as part of the family business, I'm like, yo, that's when I start to respect him. Because anybody could get a bunch of females or whatever it is, or whatever the fuck you're into, you know? You can get, you can go and headhunt that way.
We don't discriminate.
Yeah, I don't care. Love is love.
Okay?
So
love is love. I like that.
They could headhunt and for whatever kind of big game they're looking for. But
big game.
Yeah, and it was funny because for that end, you know, I don't think the Lobo would appreciate, but he likes the corporate.
What's that called? Fatty chaser? He's got a name for that.
It's like I don't know if it's a chubby chaser. Chubby chaser. I used to tell him because again, a lot of it we speak in Spanish, so I would tell him. I'd be like, if I saw a big girl, he'd look at me, he'd be like, yo, she got face though, like, you know.
Yes.
And then it was funny because
it's funny because I'm thinking that when you're saying that, some chubby girl's got a nice face.
And he would tell me that. He was like, she got a fucking face, and I was like, yo, no worries, bro. I got a CDL. I can move big equipment. Nice. So it was one of those things. I was like, if she comes with air brakes and her own airbag system, I was like, we're good money.
I like that.
But that's when I knew, like I said, just getting back to when he started to do it on business terms. I remember that us and the other workers, we sometimes, again, it was a family business, so a lot of times it'd be relatives. We would sit there and look at each other and be like, oh, there he goes again. Watch. But then it was funny because then when he started to deploy me as one of his foremen, and I was running my own crew, then they would sit back and they'd be like, yo, let young Lobo go. Let him do it. Let's see if he's one of us. Because it was one of those things that they were like, he's in the family or he's not.
Lobito.
And it felt good for my uncles, multiple uncles at that. When my dad came back, they reappeared to the site because then you master delegated. This guy come through with his importance and his fucking khakis and pointing here and there, and he has all of his relatives under the sweltering sun and fucking cargo shorts and all kinds of shit, and then boom and leave, and then come back later to the site. But he's the boss. I used to tell him, yo, he's the fucking boss. When he started letting me to basically handle some of the contracts, There'd be times we come out with tips, guys. You know, people would feed us and they treat us good, and they'd be like, yo, he's like his father. And this was after years of them not being around, you know, because when my parents split, they obviously knew of me. You know, there was some. It was actually funny because some customers didn't know. He was like, yo, that's my other son. I thought you only had my younger brother. And then they were like, oh no, and you know, my dad had like a George Foreman complex. He has multiple kids all with the same first name. But fun fact with him, and we could leave at that. And there's usually no name drops.
That's interesting.
There's no name drop. You know, there's for sure. And the only thing that, and you usually don't name drop, but this is a fucking Mexican guy, bro. And you know what his middle name is?
What?
Nero.
Ooh, I like that.
That's his fucking name.
Nice.
And I was like, yo, this is what the fuck I come from. His legacy. So then for them to be like, yo, you got a legacy. And it's not only...
Nero was one of the crazy emperors.
Yeah.
He was crazy.
Yeah. And my dad from Thursday through Sunday, he used to be a crazy bastard. I remember. I was young enough to remember. But then I used to be like... But then again, this is another old Eastern knowledge, I guess he gave. He told me, he was like, it's always better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So it's one of those things, maybe cliches, but others have probably heard it. But
that's a good one. That's a good words for...
You can't get mad at somebody that says, I'm sorry. Unless you're a dick. Like,
for any married man, that's a like, good motto.
Yeah.
You know?
And then mind you, like, you can't get mad at somebody that says, I'm sorry. Because that was the other thing, too, even with exes that I had previous. They should be like, well, I did say I'm sorry, bitch. Like, you know, and they're like, hey, whoa. And I'm like, no, I mean, I'm sorry for that, too. You know, and then I apologize. There's 2 apologies now. I'm like, yo, count yourself lucky, you know?
Sure. Count your blessings. Good show today. We're gonna wrap it up because we want to keep it at a certain time limit because you know
the brevity is important because I feel like it lingers more.
People have a short attention spans. We can't go on for hours.
Not everybody's good at listening.
No.
I wonder if they listen when you mention about so they should subscribe.
Please subscribe. It's very important to get these juicy informational nuggets.
I appreciate you guys for it. I'm an appreciator. I appreciate if you subscribe.
We listen to your feedback. You listen to us. All right? It goes both ways. Full circle. All right? Thank you guys and good night.
Good night.